Hello and welcome to another Cork Taylor Wine Podcast. We are back. We are in studio. We got a great guest. I am still Luke Taylor, which is a good or bad thing for some of you or all of you. And like I said, we've got a great podcast. Just want to remind you, if you'd like or even love this podcast, hard to believe, I know, be sure to rate it, be sure to review it, be sure to tell all your wine friends about it. Tell them to subscribe to the Cork Taylor Wine Podcast. As by subscribing when a new episode comes out, they will get a notification. Also follow us and comment on our Cork Taylor Facebook and Instagram pages. Lastly, please support us. Actually, I'm a one-man Wolfpack train wreck, so it's just me. And keep the podcast going and growing. Please consider joining our Cork Taylor Patreon page by going to www.patreon.com/Cork Taylor. Help support my journey to make the Cork Taylor Wine Podcast gain in global domination for as little as a $7 per month donation and get exclusive behind-the-scenes content and great bonus material. $7 is like a glass of some really bad house wine Pinot Grigio. So, my guest right here, the winery he works with, or works for, with, whatever you want to call it, the definition of the winery name, a short piece of music designed to give a performer practice in a particular area or skill. So I figured I would sing his college fight song today. For Whitworth, fight, 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 and win. For the crimson and black, the highest honors bring back. For Whitworth, fight, 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 and win. Onward to victory. Be not content with less. Whitworth deserves the best. So come on, Whitworth, fight and win. We have Jon Priest, General Manager, Winemaker of Etude Wines in lovely California. And I love your studio.
Oh, yeah. Well, you caught me in my office, and I haven't heard that fight song, I don't think, ever. So I'm very impressed with that, too. Thanks.
Yes, you are the Pirates. You are the first and only Whitworth graduate we've ever had on the podcast. So it's an honor and a pleasure, Jon.
I think there's one other winemaker that may have come out of that small little liberal arts school. So,
and I bet you don't know who their name is.
Heights, yeah, a little bit older than I am. But,
okay,
yeah.
So, Jon, welcome. Really excited. You are the winemaker and general manager. I guess, is there much of a difference, or are you like your boss, kind of technically, as the?
More or less. So I run the show here, the operations, and then the winemaker. On a good day, I'm a winemaker, and the rest of the time, just making sure everything is just going right. But everybody has a boss, so I look upwards sometimes for sure.
Yes, yeah, I like that. I like that. Or you just go home and then you figure out who it really is. Is that kind of common to see a lot of winemakers also be the general manager too?
I guess in some respects. I mean, there are oftentimes we'll run the operations. I mean, for a long time in my career, I was the winemaker as well as the director of winery operations. And that's kind of what I'm doing here as well. But, oversee a little bit of the finance and, the facilities and the operations and such. And, of course, all that personnel fun stuff, too. But
yeah,
the winemaking is really where it really hits my heart.
Yeah. So what you're trying to tell me is the owner's cheap.
No, we have a great owner. We have a lot of support for what we do, and a lot of autonomy. And
good answer.
I couldn't be happier. Yeah.
It must be payday. Probably not. My mom doesn't listen. My wife doesn't listen. Shit, I don't even listen. But so Etude was established in 1982 when founding winemaker Tony Soter, that's a big name, especially in Oregon, set his sights on the cool climate Cornish region in the pursuit of producing world-class Pinots. And we're actually going to try a Chardonnay first. So, hey, why not? But why not? You've been there since
2005.
Yeah, 2005. Just making sure you remember.
Yep. Yeah,
just making sure.
And seen a lot happen along those years as well.
Yeah, the wine industry has kind of changed a little bit since those times, huh?
A lot more competition out there. I think there's a real focus on real luxury, high quality wines. I think wines in general are just better overall. I mean, from every category, the wines have just improved.
Yeah. How difficult is it to kind of compete in that kind of sphere or market?
Boy, just really having being present in front of the gatekeepers is really important. Keeping your name out there in front, and then of course just having that the passion and the commitment to making really, really good wine. You can't go anywhere without, that good product in the glass.
Right. And has your kind of style changed with the style change at times? And I guess this is kind of a leading answer or a leading question. So mid to early 2000s, there was a certain type of the traditional Napa cab, big, bold, nice tannins. Now you're seeing out of certain parts of California, you're not seeing that from not everybody. You're kind of seeing more of a sweeter style. How do I put it? Do you kind of see where I'm going or no? Just say yes, please.
You more like cocktail kind of wine, you thinking?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
we've
a good way to
probably
put
gone far the other direction away from that, and a little more restraint. Etude has always had a sense of elegance and really that texture and all the flavor and everything that comes directly from that transparent to the vineyard. And I think that we've really just, over the years, as the vineyards get older, we're just really tuned into that. And I think that's really where we're going. So no, we're not necessarily trying to make wines that are stylized or fashioned. We're really trying to stay true to that terroir and that vineyard.
Right. So you're originally from the central coast of California.
I am. I'm fifth generation Californian, but grew up in San Luis Obispo, right smack down in the middle of the central coast. Yeah. Great wine growing area, pretty good surfing.
So I live in Ohio, so we've got like kind of the Civil War still, like the South still thinks the Civil War is going on. And they think they're winning too, which is kind of comical. And I love the South, don't get me wrong. I love white barbecue. But do you feel there's like kind of a competition between the North and South of California?
I don't know if it's North and South necessarily. I mean, it's really, are you talking about wine or talking about just politically in general?
Just in general. No, not politically. We're not talking politics, and we're not talking about and we're not talking about COVID too either, John. Don't bring that crap up here. I'm sick of it. Never happened.
It's interesting. There's an interesting proposition voting process in California. If you get enough signatures, you can put your proposition on the ballot. And there was one a few years ago about breaking California up into 7 different states. And when you think about it, sort of geographically and the sensibility of all those regions, it kind of makes sense. So, of course, I didn't want to vote for that. I mean, we want to keep our state intact. No civil wars here. But it really, really demonstrates how big a state it is. And I don't know if there's a north and south. There's an east and west and everywhere in between. It's very, very diverse.
Yeah. So you grew up in San Luis Obispo, and then you joined the legendary wine cast company. How the hell did you get that job in Santa Barbara?
That was a real great gig. I started out waiting tables. I was just a young kid out of college, had a little interest in wine, just enough to know that I had an interest, but not a lot of real depth. But I tell you, that was finishing school for wine appreciation, working with Doug Marjoram and the gang there, and the array of really fine wines that we would open on a nightly basis was just phenomenal, and really helped kind of define my palate.
So you should be so honored. Doug Marjoram has been on this podcast.
Oh, Doug's a great guy. Yeah, still friends to this day, believe it or not.
Yeah, he is interesting fellow in all of a good way.
Absolutely. Doing a great thing. And he really is such a fixture of the Santa Barbara wine scene. Has been forever, for decades. Yeah.
Oh gosh, yeah. So how much did that kind of learning about wine, tasting wine, working on that side of the industry kind of create what you're doing now kind of thing? Did it help kind of reinforce?
Yeah, it really developed a palate, really a discerning palate to understand, the different nuances. And I really became a student of Burgundy, way too young to know better. But, remember too, those wines were fairly affordable back then. But I had a chance to really dig into Burgundy. I became a student of that region and really fell in love with Pinot Noir. And that was the first absolute love affair with this grape. And never really set out to be a winemaker. I thought my friends were going off to work crush. And it's like, that sounds cool. I want to work hard and not get paid well, but, get my hands sticky and dirty. So I went off to work harvest and absolutely fell in love with that side of it as well. I thought I was going to be a sommelier. And that was cut short pretty quickly once I just, started driving forklifts. Really that side of it as well.
Yeah. I got a forklift, and I think my sons especially think I'm pretty cool. Their dad is a forklift. And I will tell you, I don't know if if you ever had this experience. I remember the first time I ever unloaded wine off a semi, and the guy comes to the back and he's like, "Well, how are you going to unload this?" I'm like, "Well, we're going to do it hand. I don't have a." He's like, "You don't have a forklift?" I'm like, "No." So I thought this guy was going to have a freaking heart attack. And I was much younger. This was 12 years ago. So then the next week I went and bought a used forklift. I still have it to this day, knock on wood. I call it Alberta, being Canadian. And so I bought this thing, and he's like, "All right, so let's get the forklift." I said, "Here's a small problem. I don't know how to drive it." So he taught me how to drive it, and I ran into his truck multiple times, but he was cool. But yeah, driving a forklift's kind of fun.
Absolutely. And it really having the chance to get your hands dirty and really see the transformation from grape to glass. I absolutely fell in love with that process and then never left. I left that was Wild Horse Winery back in the day when it was small, and Ken Volk owned it, and we were a tiny little crew of pirates. Nobody really went to school for winemaking, so we were learning along the way, making all kinds of mistakes that Ken Volk was fine to pay for.
Right.
Wilson Daniels was our marketing company, so we had a lot of great inroads to top accounts, and became the winemaker 10 years later. So really a great chance to kind of learn the ropes.
Yeah, and you worked for some pretty interesting and great companies before Etude.
Not many. Yeah, not many. Wild Horse was great again. Learning from the ground up. A young cellar rat making $6 an hour way back when, not knowing a thing about winemaking, to become the winemaker 10 years later. So wonderful experience there. Briefstein at Adelaide Cellars, which is this really stunning vineyards on West Paso. Really fantastic terroir and that chalky limestone soils they have over there. But always focused on Pinot Noir. Back then, it was the old HMR vineyard that they owned, which was planted in the 60s by Andrei Telechev. So always pursuing Pinot Noir. Went down south into Santa Barbara County to a new startup project that doesn't exist anymore. So it was a good idea, but didn't have a lot of muscle. But working with some really phenomenal vineyards in Santa Maria Hills and Santa Maria Valley. And then got that wonderful phone call to come up here and take over for Tony. So he was moving away up to Oregon.
How was that interview process with Tony? Because, Tony, let's be honest, is a legend.
It wasn't much of an interview process, actually. I think it was sort of tangentially with some other folks. But he and I had developed a rapport and kind of connected on Pinot Noir. And so that was an easy transition to make. And made the moved up here. I was living in San Luis Obispo at the time. So took that 4-hour drive north and have never looked back.
Yeah. I think the reason he hired you is you're willing to work for $6.50 an hour.
Yeah, fortunately that's changed over the years.
Yeah, I would hope so, especially in Northern California. So you guys sent us some beautiful wines. The first one is a 2020 Chardonnay from the Corneris, obviously a state-grown region. I guess, why does everybody have to make a bloody Chardonnay? Let's be honest.
Funny you
why
say
does everybody
that.
make Chardonnay? It's like, why, you need it for wine dinners or something?
Funny you say that. So Etude never made Chardonnay. Pinot Gris was the white wine under Tony's watch, and it was fairly dogmatic. And I think I understand why. There was a lot of there's a style of California Chardonnay that I think that he didn't want to have anything to do with. But when we planted the Grace Benoit Ranch, which is this beautiful estate up in the very northwest corner of Sonoma, Carneros, just in the foothills between Sonoma and Petaluma, it's a great region for cool climate varieties, very volcanic soils. And on this vast property, it made sense to plant a little bit of Chardonnay where we thought it was most suited. And of course, in our style, we want to make a wine that's very, very vineyard driven. When I was first putting this together, I asked myself the same question. Does the world need another California Chardonnay? Probably not. But we have an opportunity to make a wine that is about us, about our ethos, about our sensibilities, and that real transition or translation right into the land, and a wine that really shows the vineyard and not a lot of winemaking, to be honest. Trying to be very, very light-handed in the cellar. So no new oak, barrel fermented very traditionally, certainly aged, no malolactic. Really love retaining that nice fresh acidity. You can really taste the Chardonnay rather than the winemaking. At least I hope that's the goal.
So really you did nothing is what you're saying.
Well, yeah. I mean, my job would be super
no oak.
if I did nothing.
That's really pretty.
Very, very, a little bit more.
That's really pretty. That is very elegant. Yeah.
Yeah. I love acidity in wine and that brightness, that freshness that you get. And by not putting it through that secondary fermentation, by not obscuring it with a lot of makeup, you actually smell the aroma of the fruit and taste the flavors of the Chardonnay.
Mm-hmm. How many cases would you produce of this Chardonnay each year?
Anywhere from 2,000, 2,500 cases, so not very much. And it's all from our own estate.
Okay. What does it pair well? Nice. Okay. What does it pair nice with? You're going to give me some food and wine pairings.
Well, I think the natural sort of the best pairing would be roast chicken. You'd have to just say roast chicken for sure. But I think a lot of shellfish and seafood as well. There's enough bright acidity that I get really pairs well. Really brings out the sweetness of shellfish as well, I think.
Okay. Now, what about buttered popcorn?
There's plenty of other Chardonnays that I think do well with that. But I think buttered popcorn goes with anything. But if you're looking for that big
we had a guest
wine,
I asked.
If you're looking for that big...
Well, I had a guest. Well, no, God, no, not my style whatsoever. Our first ever guest was a buddy of mine, former British Open champion Ben Curtis. And I said, give me your strangest food and wine pairing. He's like, buttered popcorn. He actually said it with red wine. And I'm like, any red wine? He's like, any red wine. I'm like, okay, that's kind of weird, but whatever. But no, that's really pleasant. That's really pleasant. Would you say this is the kind of the Chardonnay style coming out of the Cornières region now? Or would you say it's going toward that butter oaky style? Like, what is Cornières region kind of Chardonnay known for?
I think there's still a lot of very big, ripe, oaky, buttery Chardonnays produced in this region. I think there's definitely a pendulum swinging toward a little more restrained style, for sure. But you'll find the whole gamut. Chardonnay is such a malleable grape. Yeah. It really seems to tends to kind of bring the style of the winemaker forward.
But I guess why would your competitors do that style? I don't feel like that's the style of the American people right now.
That's true. I mean, there's plenty of people that like a little bit more boldness in their Chardonnay, and that's why there's so much of it still produced, for sure. So maybe a small production, small little volumes of wine like this, we can kind of tickle our own urges and be true to our own style.
Yeah. Okay. So you sent us two beautiful Pinot Noirs, and I know which one, we talked after which one to go first. I kind of know which one to go first. You want to know how I know? The size of the bottle, right? He's already drinking it. So is this the flagship, the 2019 Etude Pinot Noir?
Yes, that's the wine that we distribute nationally, and probably you would find more widely distributed. All three of these wines are from our estate, Grace Benoit Ranch. And that ranch itself is very, very unique. 1,500 acres of total property, and 2/3 of that is forest and creeks and wild turkeys and, wildlife running everywhere. And the other third is planted by small little vineyards, very little small parcels on 8 of the 13 soil types across this ranch. So very, very diverse. A lot of rolling hills, a lot of different aspects. And since Pinot Noir is that grape that really brings out that particular place, that sense of place, this wine is off of 26 individual parcels across the ranch. Different soils, different rootstocks, different different hillsides, and each one of those 26 parcels has a different kind of characteristics. So what you get here is a cuvee and kind of a representation of that entire ranch in one glass.
26 parcels.
Yeah, quite diverse. Yeah, and it's very interesting how the personality.
Is it really 26 parcels?
Yeah, on this ranch there are 161 individual blocks, so it's very, very unique. And of course, we're not making wine off of all of those, but try to get the best that we can. And I've had a chance since 2005 to walk these hills, and that's the very first year that there was an estate wine made was in 2005. So we've kind of grown up together a little bit, and I know it very intimately. And each one of those parcels is unique. You can hear the accent. You know what neighborhood it's from, but just enough of a differentiation that you can really see how it comes together well in a blend. And when you think about
does the percentages change? Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry about that. Do the percentage of parcels you put in the finished product change each year? Is it pretty much consistent?
It's fairly consistent. They will change from year to year. We'll get different yields depending on the vintage. I'll try to look for some clues early on in the growing season as to how the season is sort of what kind of fruit the season will give us, and make those decisions before we pick the grapes. I kind of joke sometimes that I make the blend before I even pick the grapes, because you really have a sense of what kind of quality you're going to get from block to block. And because we have such a vast array of choices out there, it really allows me to kind of narrow down and only pick the best blocks for each year.
Right. Why do wineries make 3 or 4 or 5 different Pinots or Cabernets? I mean, some even make like 6, 7, and 8 Pinots. It's like, are you sick of do you have a Pinot fetish, or like why do some wineries make so many of the same bloody varietal?
We make 8 Pinot Noirs as well. Yes, and yes, we do have a Pinot Noir fetish, you might say. Well, I mean, and that is the great thing about this grape. Each single vineyard has its own sort of signature, its own characteristic, its own character. It says that it's a quality. Burgundy demonstrated that to us. They've been practicing it for 800 years, where those individual parcels will be a Grand Cru, and then across an ancient goat path down below will be a Premier Cru. So, we're using this ranch as sort of an opportunity to kind of delineate where we can get different characteristics. So I have 5 different Pinot Noirs off of the Grace Benoit Ranch, and then a vineyard down in Santa Barbara County, the Fiddlesticks Vineyard, work with a vineyard out in the Sonoma Coast, and then up in the Yamela Vineyard in Willamette Valley. So just really gets a chance for a winemaker to kind of scratch that Pinot Noir urge and craft a wine from that particular place that's going to bring that sensibility out. We can't help ourselves. We really can't.
Well, no, I get that. Or you're just getting a good deal on the grapes, let's be honest.
I wish.
Do you think the consumer well, I know, I'm joking. Do you think the consumer gets confused? I'm freaking getting confused, and I'm the one asking the damn question. Do you think the consumer gets confused when you're an estate winery in Carneros, but you're making a wine from Oregon or Santa Barbara County?
Those wines that we make, we sell directly here at our winery in our tasting room. So it gives us a real opportunity to kind of present them as a study of Pinot Noir, Etude meaning study. And we can sit down and you can have a tutored tasting and go through these different wines, individual wines from our estate, whether it's the Tembler or the Deer Camp or the Laniger or the Heirloom, all from one piece of land, but different. And then how that Pinot Noir then translates to other regions that are important in the West Coast. For a little while, I was making a wine from Central Otago, New Zealand as well, to kind of put in that matrix. And it's a great opportunity for customers to really see, or our visitors, to really see why Pinot Noir is different in these different spots, these different vineyards and regions.
Right.
Maybe it's more for us.
What would be your favorite? It sounds like it. It sounds like you just want to drink those wines from there under your own label.
Right.
So this your flagship Pinot, this is very nice, very elegant, very nice, very pleasant.
Thank you.
Now, do you already have your turkey picked out, since you just go and probably shoot it on your on the vineyard site, or do you buy yours each year? Just curious.
We do. Yeah. I mean, it's a little bit of a wildlife preserve.
You do what
for us?
Oh, okay. So you buy it at a grocery store or a butcher or whatever. You do not go with your shotgun and, get Norma from the back.
No, in fact, I was out there over the weekend, just walking, having a nice hike, and saw this amazing 8-point buck just kind of hanging out with us, kind of following us around. So there's amazing wildlife out there, and we certainly want to kind of keep a light footprint out there.
Is wildlife important to the vineyards? I mean, I know there's pests and nuisance, but in general, are turkeys okay for the vineyards? We know deer aren't, but like turkeys and some of these other critters, are they okay or not necessarily?
We try to have a peaceful coexistence. We want a healthy ecosystem, so everything in balance. So you're going to have a little bit of, whether it's a good pest or a bad pest. Hopefully they balance each other out. But having a healthy population of wildlife, I think, is great. The turkeys, we have fencing that keeps the deer out. We have 12 miles of fencing on this ranch. So really, there's more open space for wildlife than there is closed off vineyard space. So we want them to roam, have a nice life and have that balance. And if they're healthy, then it kind of goes all the way through the chain of the ecosystem. And we know that we're creating a good habitat.
Yeah. So you have a 12-mile long border is what you're saying.
No, we could just have one big fence, but instead we have these small little areas that are delineated. Yeah. It's great to see all this wildlife kind of wandering through.
Oh, I can't imagine how tranquil it must be back there.
Yes, and I know exactly where to not get cell reception, so that's where I hang out.
Is Tony still involved in the whole operation?
No. He sold the winery in 2001, and then had a 5-year arrangement just to transition. We moved into this winery where we are, this property, and then one of the last things on his list, get somebody to kind of take over for him. So he was here. We worked together briefly for a little less than a year before he moved full-time up to Oregon.
Okay.
But we're still good friends. We're great colleagues and stay in touch quite a bit.
What is the best advice or what's the best advice he's ever given you?
Pick earlier. I think there's always the easiest thing to do is leave the grapes on the vine. And we have plenty of sunshine in California, and getting grapes ripe is not the problem. Maintaining balance and vitality and vibrance is a trickier sort of notion. So, not waiting until you think it's ripe, because likely it'll be overripe.
So are you telling me you have a 2020 vintage?
I do have a 2020 vintage. Absolutely. Yeah. A very good 2020
Yeah,
vintage.
because you picked early, didn't you?
We did pick early. Yeah. I think it's going to be, you kind of had to pick early because there were heat waves as well in 2020. And that was, to me, a bigger story than the fires, because we were affected more by that than we were the fires. Of course, fires is, those were terrible occurrence. And, personally, friends who lost houses and such, that was pretty dreadful. We were fortunate enough to sort of avoid any of the issues from the smoke.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's good. So now we have the Heirloom 2019. Is this kind of like the most expensive Pinot you have?
It is.
Or the second most
I'd
expensive?
say the wine that has the highest stature. It's been a wine that has been in Etude's portfolio since the mid-90s. It really came from these special vines. We have 3 different parcels or vineyards on the Grace Benoit Ranch where we grow 8 different selections of Pinot Noir that are quite unique. They're not certified clones that came through a university or an institution. Clone propagations of vines are very important to the industry. These are different. They're really more passed on from vineyard to vineyard. really collected for their inherent quality, not necessarily for their disease resistance and uniformity. They are, if Pinot Noir is the Goldilocks grape that's very precocious, these are the most precocious of all those vines. So they're special to us, and they're special to preserve. We have a bit of a reference library of this pedigreed Pinot Noir that we refer to as heirloom on our ranch, and I think it makes pretty special wine.
Can these two Pinots and even the Chardonnay, can it get a little bit of cellar age?
They can, I believe so. The way I make wine is very, very quiet. So it captures a lot of sort of its age-worthiness, its ageability that we actually put into the bottle. So even the Carneros Estate, our flagship wine, I think it's really best at 3 to 7 years in the bottle. The heirloom, just because of the quality of those vines, I do actually add a little bit more whole cluster in the fermenter for the heirloom. So that tends to have a bit of a more age-worthy kind of presence to it, and kind of build it that way a little bit. So that really starts building this bottle bouquet and these tertiary aromas maybe 5 years down the line. And when they're young, they're quite primary, but give them 5 years or a decade and they really kind of shine.
So I want to pick apart a comment you just made about yourself. A quiet winemaker. What is quiet winemaking? I've never heard that before.
Well, I think there's a lot of influence a winemaker can have on the style of the wine, and imply a lot of that style onto the grapes, onto the fermentation, onto the aging of the wine. I think I like certain tenets of wine, that freshness, that vitality, that polish of tannin. So I'm looking for grapes that are going to provide me with that potential quality. And then my job is to kind of guide them quietly, without a lot of noise, with a lot of sort of winemaking enology, to be able to bring that out in the glass. So I guess by quiet, I mean that I'm not putting a lot of extra effort into these grapes. Work with good grapes from the best vineyards and try to bring out that potential in the winery.
So did you develop the slogan for Etude, great wines are grown, not made? Not everyone can say or agree with that. Let's be honest.
I've heard that. I mentioned, I think the potential is really made in the vineyard. Our job is to coax it out and guide it for sure. I don't know that they're made in the vineyard as much as that quality is there given to us. And, it's our job to not mess it up, but also to guide it and bring out and coax out the best we can. It's just hard to make really good wine with bad grapes. I think I spent the early part of my career fixing grapes, fixing wines. Probably became a pretty good winemaker because of that. Learned a lot of tricks along the way. And you had to be a lot more deliberate winemaker in that sense, where you had to sort of not be so quiet. You had to really imply a little bit more enology along the way to craft those wines. These wines are, my style now is to kind of coax out that wonderful quality.
Mm-hmm. How long did that take for you to kind of accomplish that attitude?
Not long. I started with really, really fantastic grapes. Grapes Benoit Ranch was brand new, so we had a lot of study to understand this vast land and what we were going to get out of each of these different parcels, the different vineyards. So I had to really go into it sort of as an observer, really make those wines in a sort of a minimal winemaking sort of way to understand what those characters were going to really bring to us. And of course, the Cabernets that Tony Soter, the vineyards that he left behind for me to kind of continue to work with, are Grand Cru, some of the best in the world. So started with really good grapes.
So you're a Pinot. Etude is known for Pinot Noir. Why the hell do you make Chardonnay and Cabernet then?
Well, Cabernet was really a Tony Soter legacy. He had really made his name in Cabernet Sauvignon before starting Etude, and continued making and producing some of, Napa Valley's iconic Cabernets. Spotswood, Dalla Valle, Viadere. I mean, he's just, you name it, he had his hands in it, in the early days. So he knew the regions and the vineyards where he wanted to sort of craft an Etude Cabernet Sauvignon. So it was easy for him to start, the impulse was too strong to not have a Cabernet in the portfolio. So for the longest time, there were two wines. There was the white label Pinot Noir and the black label Cabernet. And those were the two pillars for a long time. When I first joined Etude, I would travel a little bit representing the winery, and occasionally come across somebody who didn't know we made Pinot Noir, usually in Texas. That doesn't happen as much anymore because we're certainly making more Pinot Noir than we are Cab, but we were as well known for Cabernet as we were Pinot Noir. And even today, we're getting fantastic accolades for our Cabernet as well.
Really? Where do you guys source? Do you guys have some vineyards that are Cabernet?
Primarily sourced, and these are the who's who. The Meteor Vineyard in Coombsville, really, really fantastic. Easily the best vineyard in that appellation. The Vine Hill Ranch in Western Bench of Oakville, that is Grand Cru. We share that wine with some of the most expensive and well garnered wine. Highest garnered wines in Napa Valley. Gary Morrisoli down at the end of Kneebaum Lane in the Rutherford Bench. Gary's a fourth generation grape grower. Nobody's farmed more Rutherford dust than Gary Morrisoli. So really working with these iconic vineyards, with these stalwart growers is really, really amazing and quite an honor.
What? Oh, I'm sure. I mean, those are, I've heard of Gary Morrisoli. I mean, I know some wineries that actually buy grapes from him like yourself. So I understand the quality there. How big of a difference is it, in your opinion, as a winemaker, from working with your own grapes to estate grapes to purchasing grapes, source grapes, I guess?
That's a great question. When you have your own ranch and it so intimately.
Whoa, John. It took you 32 minutes to acknowledge that was a great effing question. Please proceed.
That was a great question. It was. Because there really is a difference. I mean, there are more growers than there are wineries. So clearly, those growers are selling their grapes as well. I think there's benefits to both for sure. The vineyards where we're sourcing our Cabernet, we can't buy those vineyards. We can't own those vineyards. Either they're going on to the fifth generation of the family, or they're just, the real estate is incredibly ridiculous. But they are, because they're in those hallowed parcels, hallowed spots in Napa Valley. On the other hand, having a ranch like the Grace Benoit Ranch, where you can get to know it so very, very well and really delineate where to find that quality, and then farm it to your specifications, and really take those tenets of sustainability and healthy soil, and farm it in the way that makes you feel good and how you want to do it. You have ultimate control of that is really key as well.
Right, absolutely. Well, I don't know if is there much Corneros Cabernet right now?
Not a lot. There's a little bit. It's interesting, in the Napa side of Corneros, as soon as you get to a certain elevation, it becomes Mount Veeder. So maybe along that border between Mount Veeder and Corneros, you might see some Cabernet vines. I think Larry Hyde has a little bit of Cabernet growing, but not a lot. A little too cool.
Yeah. Well, maybe with climate change, you'll see all of a sudden Corneros will all be, you'll just see no more Pinot Noir and Chardonnay and Corneros or Merlot. It'll just be all Cabernet. Napa will just be a wealth of Cabernet.
Well, I tell you, we have to really think forward and kind of figure out how to make those adaptations. And, I think that story is yet to be told for sure. Right.
John, I got nothing else, man. You're probably sick of talking to me, but you're gonna stick around. You're gonna stick around. We're gonna do a little bonus episode here. So yeah, that's it, John. You're done. Thanks for joining us. listeners. I know it's not my mom or my wife. See, I should just bitch about my mom and wife more because they don't listen. But I hope you had a great time listening. Be sure to rate it, review it, and share it. And if you like, feel free to give me 5 stars on Apple and Spotify podcasts. If you're going to give me 3 or 4 stars, just don't press the send button or the OK button. 5 stars, that's it. Also, I'd like to invite you to join and follow the Cork and Taylor Facebook and Instagram pages. Please consider supporting us on our Cork and Taylor Patreon page by going to www.patreon.com/Cork and Taylor and think global domination. I'm all about global domination, even though I'm Canadian. We have a tough time with Quebec, but whatever. Again, thanks again for listening. We'll be back. We'll see you next time on the Cork and Taylor Wine Podcast. All right, John.